The wound is where you serve from. You integrate your wound and it allows you to be a better leader.
I do feel that that's true. And I do feel that leaning into the loss and grief of Claire has been really helpful for me as a teacher to learn, how to share from there and be able to access my heart from there. I'd been in a couple of relationships that didn't work out. And I think a lot of that was mainly because I was still grieving Claire or choosing things from a confused place. Like, I'm so blessed at the spectrum of life that I've been able to live. I've experienced the most gut-wrenching pain and the most, ecstatic bliss that a human can experience. This is something that I think a lot of men's work misses, right? Is that the masculine is not in experience. It's not just fucking pounding your chest and warrioring up. Unless you are able to stay connected to that which is never changing. The you before you were born, right? That you is going to be the same you when you die. And this is where Buddhism comes in, right? Because the capacity to really stay in that deep tether to that which never changes while fully experiencing everything changing all the time right now is a true masculine embodiment. Men want to love their partners really well. And then I think what happens is they get confused because the things that they thought worked aren't working.
John, the last time we talked, it was during 2020.
Oh, right.
In the insanity.
Yeah.
And I was living in a totally different place.
Yeah.
You've come to Austin. You spend half your time in Sedona, half your time in Austin.
Yeah.
What energetically, what was palpable to draw you out here to Austin?
Yeah. Well, whenever I've been in a transitional period throughout my life, I've always sort of built my life around men's groups. I did this when I was 30 and my daughter was young and sick, and I was in New York as a graduate student, and there was a men's group in LA, and I literally moved back to LA and to be with this men's group. And then I guess when Claire was, 12 or something, and really up against it and started a new business, I was starting to train in what I do now. And so I built a men's group there, and those guys became, like my brothers for 8 years, Teo Alfaro, Rich Litvin, those guys. So I've always kind of relied on men's groups, having a really strong group of men, and the opportunity to create one here came up. I'm in a group with Stefanos and Preston and a few other guys, Adrian and Brian Reeves, and a bunch of really good guys.
Yeah.
And Luke Story's in it, and so I was like, I'm just gonna I want to be in a community of men, and in LA most of that had dissipated. All of my guys had sort of split. So I was like, at every time that I felt transitional in my life, and LA has just sort of felt done. Claire's gone, and I don't have a romantic partner there. It was like, there's just nothing there for me to keep me there. My family had moved out. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna just stay with this formula because it's fucking worked my entire life. Yeah. And so I came here really with that intention. And, so I got here 2 weeks later, we put together a group. We meet twice a month, and, and I'm just sort of dropping into the beauty of having a personal men's group that I can just, be in and be myself and not have to lead.
Yes. It's so, I assume because you lead so many people, the nourishment, which is one of the ingredients for the masculine you talk about in the book, is you just receiving instead of you always leading. Yeah. For your nervous system, that's got to be the most healing thing for you to actually be held.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just good for me to be in that space of just being humble and being being able to ask for help and being able to go fuck, I don't know exactly what I'm doing right now. Even though in my work I have a very clear vision and I feel, but in my personal life, it's been one of those things since my daughter died where I haven't, the last 4 years, I haven't quite figured out exactly what life without her should be like, and it's a hard thing I don't talk about it much, so we're just jumping into it here, but it's just been, it's grief is a weird thing, and losing your only child is a deep thing, and I haven't quite figured out what my life is supposed to be like outside of work, which again, I love, but it's not, it's not it, it's not everything for me. Yeah.
Man, I totally feel you. I'm a dad and we're pregnant again. Carrie's pregnant. And so our second babe's coming in April.
Yeah.
And I cannot even, it would be a disservice and an injustice to you if I pretended to know what that feels like, because I don't.
Yeah.
So the only thing I can offer, all of us can offer for someone that's gone through that is reverence, like true reverence.
Thank you. Yeah,
and so I feel to the bottom of that, and it's I didn't know we were going to go here, but like I remember two and a half years ago, I had done some preparation for our 2020 interview, and I remembered, I'm going to paraphrase, you had said something like, the wound is where you serve from. You integrate your wound, and it allows you to be a better leader. Otherwise, God's spirit, higher intelligence would not have given you the contrast of that pain. You needed like the depth of the pain to really understand what the other side of the light feels like. Yeah. Do you remember saying that? Does that still feel true
I
for
definitely,
you?
Yeah, that still feels true. And I can't remember exactly how I can barely remember
it was
what I said last
like
week,
that.
but last podcast. But yeah, that I do feel that that's true. And I do feel that, leaning into the loss and grief of Claire has been really helpful for me as a teacher, right? To learn, how to share from there and be able to access my heart from there, rather than try to teach over it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, this is sort of a different thing. It's like, as a parent, you'll spend the next 20 some odd years. You have, newborn and another one coming, right? Your first baby's 2 years old, 1 year old?
Almost, yeah. Almost 19 months.
Yeah. Okay. So it's just like, you'll spend the next 20 some odd years. And then there's this whole life after, they leave the nest kind of thing. And even though I knew Claire was dying, like I never thought that the transition would be this destabilizing in a certain way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like just this confusing, like, wow, so really to go back to your first question, one of the reasons why I came here was I just needed a fresh start. I needed to rethink, I'd been in a couple of relationships that didn't work out. And I think a lot of that was mainly because I was still grieving Claire or choosing things from a confused place and not able to really be, So I just needed to reset. And Austin had a bunch of friends and a bunch of community. And my daughter was actually born here. Claire was actually born here in Austin 25 years ago.
What a cool homage to her to be here.
Yeah. It was a trip. I was driving Breckenridge and I was like, I had this feeling of like, whoa, like Claire was born here. Our journey started here. It's a long-winded answer, just a lot of personal reflection and going into like find answers, okay, let's see how I can put this. Yeah. Finding where I belong as a human, not necessarily as a teacher in the world.
Yeah.
Right. Because I feel good about that. I know my space there, but just like as a human, as another human, where do I belong?
Yeah. It's like, that's just one facet of yourself, you, the teacher. Like you're also a man, a brother, a student of life.
I need things. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
And I mean, I need community. I need to belong. I need space just like everybody else does,
John, I feel like in looking way back for you, like 30 years of Buddhist practice plus 10 years with data, multiple decades of like the deepest possible work, not having the father figure when you grew up. My dad did the best he could, but he fell short. And I think a lot of men fall short. Yeah. And it's not a judgment against them. It's just more like they didn't have the consciousness to show up fully with the level of awareness they were at.
Yeah.
So with all these ingredients, do you ever like take a 30,000 foot look and like float above your timeline and look back and go, wow, God really gave me the contrast to be able to serve really like the most expansive canon of love and light and awareness around masculine, feminine relationships because of the contrast that you experienced in your life and maybe still do, like we all do.
Yeah. I haven't thought about it as contrast, although it is, right, for sure. What I've done recently is to just take stock, like really be like, I'm so blessed at the spectrum of life that I've been able to live. Like I can say very clearly, like I've experienced the most gut-wrenching pain and the most, ecstatic bliss that a human can experience, right? And I'm just grateful that I've been given such a wide swath of life experience, including not having, my grandfather's died when I was quite young. My father kind of bailed. And so, and I do feel blessed that, that somehow it worked out that I ended up think about it. When I was here in Austin, I was studying art. I was studying to be a curator when Claire was born. I have no fucking idea how I got from there to here. None. Yeah. No, I didn't even know what I do now for a living existed.
Right.
And this was 25 years ago. So it's just it's so mystic, man. It's so beautifully mystic that, where we end up and how we end up. And I guess, for any of your listeners, that are, starting their journeys of what they want to give in the world, you really have no idea, how things are going to play out.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
You have to adapt to whatever the tide is pushing you towards. You might have this concrete shoreline as a man where you're like, I know exactly where I'm going. I know exactly what I'm doing. But then mystery comes in and just fucks up that whole plan.
Yeah.
So it's the adaptability is what I heard from you. Like being an adaptable man means that you have an understanding of all the intricacies of yourself. And if you don't, then I think nature and the tide will continue to crash against your razor edge and humble the shit out of you.
Well, certainly I've been humbled, right? But in all kinds of ways. But the thing that looking back now, and this goes to the piece about men's group, is the one constant has been structure. Structure of practice, the structure of a men's group, the structure of a student-teacher relationship. I've really the in-between has been, kind of interesting and fluttery as fuck. You know what I mean? Who knows, the human condition is very sensitive, but I've always maintained the structure of having a teacher, always having a teacher, always being a student, having multiple teachers, so I've been with teachers for many, many years. David and I aren't really in that relationship anymore, but I was with him for a long time. I was with a men's group for a long time. And so I think the thing that really was the missing ingredient, and I say this in the book, right, was the men's group. Yeah. And the structure of being a student. And I hope that I'm a student for the rest of my life, because everything else, there's no way I could have predicted both the heartache and the amazing blessings that came, but I had something to hold me the whole way through.
Yeah.
And that really called for me to be in integrity and depth and the whole thing.
This podcast is brought to you by clothing that every single person on planet Earth must wear. It's from my friends over at Cozy Earth. They make this viscose bamboo, linen, bedding, loungewear, temperature regulating, natural, breathable, luxurious clothing. It's the best I've ever had. I seriously have bought 5 new outfits in less than a week. You don't have to do that. You can start with just 1 or 2. Let's face it, cheap clothes, they wear out quick. And there's a reason why Cozy Earth has been featured on Oprah's list of favorite things. I've been wearing the men's hoodie and their pants for a couple weeks now. And what I noticed about the 4-way stretch tech is that I'm a man, but whether you're a man or a woman, you are going to love this. It is cushy. It is comfy. It looks good. I would wear this to dinner. I would wear this to an outing. I would wear it around my house. It is just durable, incredible clothing. I've been incessantly nonstop telling Carrie Michelle, I love these clothes. She's like, okay, I get it. I'm pretty much going to buy one of everything. You can take a test drive. Just head over to cozyearth.com. Use code JOSH, J-O-S-H. They're giving you a super generous discount, 40% off. 40% off site-wide. That's a lot. Use code JOSH over at cozyearth.com. 40% off. Look good, feel good, do something that's good for the planet, and save some money, all while you do it. One of the things I love in the book, and there's highlights all over it. I'll highlight the part that hit me the absolute hardest that I think every single man and woman can connect to. I'll do that in just a minute. Sure. But you talk about this new masculine paradigm where before we have the John Wayne, strong, silent type, and I've even seen a glorification of the ego's the enemy in Ryan Holiday's work and the stoicism return. But even in the stoicism, I feel there's a tightening, there's an armoring, there's a guarding. And so that's not really going to give us what we want as men. And definitely women aren't always looking for that. So what is this new paradigm of which you speak? And how did you touch the parts of it that you believed were causing people pain to have an integration of something in the middle that actually makes sense for all of us.
Well, I'll give a little setup, which is that, we all have a masculine and a feminine, right? We all have the part of us that feels, experiences, emotes, expresses, right? That's everybody's feminine, not just for women.
Yeah.
And we all have a masculine. That's the part of us that is grounded, still, expansive consciousness. So you could just really think of the masculine and feminine in all of us as these energetics, these natural energetics that all humans have. The new masculine paradigm is an amplification, first an amplification, and then an embodied amplification, and then an integration of those two things, so that the conscious masculine is aware of the infinite space of unchanging consciousness, aware of the ground, but also fully sensitive to feel the space around them. So that there's a perfect blend of sensitivity, to make it real simple, sensitivity and grounded consciousness. And when those two things are in balance and in an integration, then you have like a fully sensitive, intuitive, open-hearted, loving human, man or woman or other, right? That is tethered to something beyond experience. And this is something that I think a lot of men's work misses, right? Is that the masculine is not in experience. It's not just fucking pounding your chest and warrioring up and getting in a ring with somebody. You know what I mean? Like, that's one element of masculine training, of course, warriorhood, and it's an important one. But unless you are able to stay connected to that which is never changing, like, there's a part of you that will never change. The you before you had a name, the you before you were born, right? That you is going to be the same you when you die. Everything else is changing right now, right? So this capacity to, and this is where Buddhism comes in, right? Because the capacity to really stay in that deep tether to that which never changes, while fully experiencing everything changing all the time right now, is like a true masculine embodiment. And when we do that, when we're in that space, we feel more, we make better decisions. We're not acting from ego or habit. We're acting from sensitivity and depth. And it's a lifelong practice that I certainly haven't mastered, and but it's what I believe is where men are wanting to head, all of them that I work with, for sure.
Well, and I assume, and I can feel that the reason why you're trustable and you've had the success you've had is because you actually share about where you are. You're honest about it. There's nothing, in my opinion, less trustable than a leader who's on the mountain and does not ever open the kimono to show the wounds.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but then of course there's the dysregulated version of that where the leader is just hyper sharing about their wounds. Yeah. So it's like there's a middle point. I was feeling into what you're saying, the tether, because remember back in school we had the tether ball where we hit the ball. Yeah. So the tether is it almost feels like the string is the awareness and the consciousness that is connected to the pole and the concrete and the ground, which might be the soul. I haven't thought about this until now. Yeah. Is that kind of a visual for people?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many ways to describe it.
And then life hits the ball for us, and we have to hang on.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's another way to think about it is, think of an astronaut tethered, to a space station or to something floating out in space, right? And it's that there's something, consciousness, however you want to define consciousness, right? I consider it the infinite expanse of the field of awareness, right? So you and I are having this experience of having a conversation, a great conversation. There's a field of awareness in you and me through which this whole experience is emerging. There would be no experience for us to have without the field of awareness, right? There's behind it, right? The witness behind the witness behind the, you know what I mean? And feeling that helps to deepen and ground, our consciousness, our conversation, our relationships. And rather than this just be some kind of monkish practice that, guys go, head out into the cave or go into nature or, whatever, this is now something, you can take it out of the retreat and bring it into the moment and make it relational. So, in a Vipassana retreat, we'd go for 10 days and we'd practice this.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Now, so we take that tether to consciousness in the retreat and we attach, we add our feminine, we add feeling, we add sensitivity, we add our emotion, we add our hearts, we add our desires, we add all that stuff. And both of them exist simultaneously. And that's where you get really deep, beautiful practice, whether it's sexual practice, whether it's, holding your daughter, whether it's, whatever it is. Yeah. So that's the new masculine paradigm, is how do we transmit that through the body, right? Because masculinity, as I define in there, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, other people can have different paradigms, but masculinity is the transmission of that. Is the embodied transmission of that. It's not winning. It's not, it's not seducing the woman. It's not making the billion. It's not like any of the things that, it's not stoicism. It's not riding a horse. It's the capacity to feel, and to feel the depth of infinite space in this moment and the depth of experience in this moment, and then transmit it through your eyes, through your breath, through your body, through your sex, through your heart, right? And
those things you mentioned, like the billionaire and, being stoic, maybe in the full, I guess you could say, color palette of being a man or also being a woman, you might touch those or experience those at times. Yeah. But like to sit in that and to identify with being a billionaire or being a hard-charging entrepreneur that never takes a break. Full truth, John and I were supposed to interview already, and I read a passage in his book about how the masculine sacrifices his health many times to have namesake in for productivity, in the name of productivity. And it's a learning edge for me at 42 that I still bump up against, where I'll go really hard and then I'll come back. And so I visualize myself as the tether, like I sometimes disconnect from myself in the name of getting shit done. Where do you think, and that's just my story that I'm working through, but I think a lot of men feel this way, and maybe the masculine inside of women too. Maybe that occurs inside of human beings, where the hard charging is like the thing that we're going to sacrifice ourselves for. I see this a lot with Italian grandmothers, or Jewish mothers, right? The guilt. Where does this come from? Looking at behavioral psychology and just 30,000 feet above society, where is the emanation of this? The hard driving, hard charging for productivity. What is that?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's all about love, and you know what I mean. And if we get this, then we'll be loved, then we'll be adored, then we'll be right. I mean, ultimately, virtually every decision we make, even the ones we make to win, even the ones we make to be successful, even the ones we make to be, to have a six pack, to be the best football player, to be the best billionaire, the best, oftentimes it's driven by an unconscious desire to be acknowledged, to be loved, right? The toxic masculine, I would describe it as, is bent on winning. The toxic masculine is bent on winning. And, you could take it all the way back to the papal decrees of the 1500s, right? I mean, where manifest destiny was born, and we were, go out and, take over these lands, in the name of God. But the toxic masculine is really about winning, dominating, conquering, acquiring, right? Whether it's acquiring experience or acquiring land or acquiring wealth or acquiring women or acquiring sex or whatever it is. So when feminism came in the 70s, the only real paradigm that women had was the toxic masculine paradigm of Mad Men, of corporate America, right? And so they definitely seized that, and they should, right? I mean, this was great to have equal parity with men, even though they're still not making the same money that men make. But that was what they were charging for. What they got was, the toxic masculine paradigm through a woman's body, and which many of them are unwinding. Like they're now aware, like, oh fuck, like we didn't want that. We don't want to die of heart attacks and be totally stressed out and Like that's not what we signed up for. Yeah. So a lot of women that I teach are kind of unwinding that toxic masculine paradigm that was kind of an unexpected byproduct of feminism. Yeah. And now what they're trying to do is celebrate, the Kendra Kunoff, who's a dear friend and co-teacher of mine, she says the new wave of feminism will celebrate the feminine. right? And I think that's where women are really sort of starting to land, of like, how do we integrate this masculine, this, hard driving masculine with the intuitive magic goddess that, is at the core of me, right? Nature driven goddess that's at the core of me. And so, women are going through this change too. And you got to think that this is new, man. Like, this is the first time in fucking history.
It is brand new.
Yeah, that we've actually, as humans, been able to not need each other for the things we needed each other for from the dawn of time: security, procreation, wealth, like all the things that we need. I needed kids to work the farm. I needed kids to help me hunt. I needed a lot of kids to help me hunt so that we could have enough food, right? That's new. Like, that's just changing. So we're at an interesting stage of both the history of relationship and just the history of, men and women, and, and the way that gender itself is being looked at and practiced.
Yeah. There's so much there. Oh my God.
Yeah, sorry, man.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. One of the things you wrote is you said the new paradigm of masculinity does not deny our primal natures, but harnesses them consciously in service of love and freedom. I mean, just that right there is like a lifetime of work. Like, in order to be loving, you have to have an open heart. In order to be free, you cannot have your amygdala hijacked by media and confusion.
Yeah, exactly.
So the order is tall for us men.
Yeah.
I've felt this ever since my 20s. I got into men's work with Johnny Blackburn in like 2013. And I have consistently felt in all relationships, and definitely in this one where I'm a father, that the demands of the modern masculine are so high, the bar is set so high, there are sometimes I wonder if we or I will ever be able to achieve them. Do you ever feel like that?
Of course, yeah. And the bar is set so high that we'll probably never achieve them except for moments. But that does not mean that it's not the bar we try to ascend towards, right?
Yes.
Because what'll happen, what I've experienced is that there is a process of practicing, opening, expanding capacity, expanding nervous system, expanding awareness, expanding sensitivity, which is a yogic and meditative practice. It's not something too woo-woo. Everybody can do it.
Yeah.
And then there's a forgetting. There's a contraction, there's a forgetting. And then there's a recommitment, there's a failure, there's a recommitment, and then you get on it and you start doing it again, Perfect example is being reactive when your partner's criticizing you. Right?
Been there.
Yeah. Me too. Right. And I think like, I should just hold space for her and be consciousness. Yeah, I should be the fucking oak. But she's just like, she's cutting me so hard. I can't. So that's a failure and recommitment. Right. But you don't stop recommitting. You don't stop recommitting and expanding. So it's like, a stock graph going up, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like there's ups and downs.
Some years are lean.
Yeah, but there's consistent improvement, and then there's moments of where just your capacity to love and to feel and to what I talk about in the book, liberate another through your practice, liberate another in the moment. Like, women don't need us to liberate them in their lives. They're sovereign beings. They can do their own thing.
Yes.
But we all need somebody to liberate our hearts in a moment every now and then, right? To like take us from the place of forgetting to the place of open remembrance of love, right? And so our capacity just grows to be able to do that. And the more we do, the more our capacity as leaders, especially leaders of men, grows, and our capacity to love our partners well grows, and parent our children grows. And so this is an embodied process of failure and recommitment that we never fucking master. And I think that's the problem going to the way of the superior man. A lot of guys read that book and they were like, he makes this sound so fucking easy. But
that's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, it's not, right? I mean, it's not. And so guys are like, well, this sounds so easy, but I can't do it, so it must be me. So they start beating themselves up and trying to contort themselves into this sort of masculine data bot, right? And, one of the things that I really wanted to do with this book was to say, yeah, this is not easy. Like, this actually takes all these other commitments and skills to just start to approach that. Not everybody has 40 years of yogic and meditative practice. Not everybody, has that kind of experience, right?
Yeah.
So we're householders.
Householders of what exactly? Like, it seems to me like it's householders of wisdom that maybe the Native Americans and many cultures, they just naturally live that way. But there's really what we're doing is we're remembering what that way of living and way of being actually was before it was genocided and torn down.
I think in some instances you're right. I mean, whatever your ancestry is, right? There's a remembrance to your. I think we're circling back because the 20th century, modernity didn't quite work,
and we're also not in their world. So I wonder how our ancestors would have shown up in our world. With the kind of, it's such a paradox there.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. Like, how do we bring the wisdom of those cultures, right? Whether it's a Taoist or, a tantric Buddhist or, a Native American or any other wisdom culture, right? How do we bring that wisdom, to modern life where we do have technology and we do have social media and we do have our phones and we do, you know what I mean? And that's a really important question. And my thought on that is that it has to be, if we're not grounded and tethered to that which never changes, we'll be swept up in that which is constantly changing, and we'll lose what trustability we have as leaders and as men and as romantic partners.
How do you deepen your practice to the anchor, to the tether yourself? And you talk about in the book, there's certain ingredients for men to do this. There's got to be something practical that you just naturally do, because it connects you to that tether. What is that?
Well, the first is ground, right? So the first is, first is ground. The very close second is breathe, right? And I go through the whole process of it. And we just did a beautiful breath practice before you let us in. And so breathing, it's impossible to drop into any higher level of consciousness without breath. Yeah. Really, it's almost impossible. I mean, I guess some people can do it, but
no, I'm with you. I don't think it's possible.
Yeah. But then grounding is something that often gets missed. So opening up the soles of my feet. I can open up the soles of my feet and feel down 10 feet into the earth with no trouble at all. And that grounds me, right? I could press the diamond, my pubic bone, my sacrum, the outside of my hips, that's a diamond at the base of my body. I press that down into the earth and plug it into the earth. And all of a sudden I'm plugged into the magnetism of the earth, right? And if you're with me, you can actually feel that happening, and it has an impact on your nervous system. So if I'm breathing and grounding at the same time, and this is really good for men to know about their romantic partners, if you can ground, then you can impact her nervous system or anybody's nervous system.
Yes.
Now, once you're breathing, then you feel your heart soften, right? There's like a process to this. And then after you feel your heart soften, your breath is deep, your body's grounded, you feel back into that part of you that's never changed. Like to the core of you, which is why the book's called From the Core, right? So there's a core essence of you that has never changed, that's always there, that's infinite, right? Your soul, your consciousness, whatever you want to call it. And you feel into that, and you put all those things together. First you do that in your own body, then you give it. Then you start to give it to who you're with, your partner, a space, the people you're teaching. So it's a process of learning to ground, breathe, open, deepen, and then give.
I love that, man. And also what's going on physiologically is you're clearing the cerebral spinal fluid, and you're getting the 4 diaphragms to pump into the cranium all the way from the perineum. Like, there's so much kind of heady science stuff going on. I just know that it feels good. And then when I feel good, like case in point, I know that everybody listening can relate to this. When I go home and I haven't done 10 breaths in my truck before I show up to the house, my woman can smell it and feel it on me right away.
Oh yeah, that's
There's
a great
not
practice,
some kind of like a wiping of my work energy. Then she's immediately turned off. And it's been vocalized.
Oh wow.
And it goes to the point.
That's great.
She has no problem letting me know.
That's great.
Letting me know I'm showing up. So one of the parts in the book, it's on page 115. We're talking about this book right here, which I love the cover. Is this somewhere you visited?
No, I'm a big fan of mountains and glaciers and rivers and cold lakes. So
hence Thunder Mountain in Sedona. Okay, so this one was deep for me, and it's about men taking responsibility for the relationship, take responsibility from the core. And I can relate to this. Each unconscious abdication of leadership in the relationship is a pinprick to her heart. Over the course of the years, thousands of these moments will scar or harden her. As time went by, she felt your lack of presence, awareness, and attention, and she grew increasingly angry. This is such another paradox, because when a man is on mission, on purpose, he bleeds for his mission. I know I do. And so by the time I get home, or, the presence and the attention that I want to give to her, it's just not there. And it could be man or woman, woman or man.
Yeah,
either one. Yeah. That really hit me hard, because if I'm going to take responsibility for my relationship, it doesn't completely take all the responsibility for her to show up off of her, but it definitely gives me the capacity and ownership to fully harness who I am as a man, as a leader, as a father.
Right.
Can you unpack that slowly? Because I needed some more clarity even reading the book.
Sure. Well, I think the first thing we're talking about is capacity, right? Like, so bleeding for your purpose, bleeding for your mission requires you to be here, giving everything you can. Yeah. And then going home, you've got a child to take care of, and you've got, someone who wants your presence and, awareness and heart openness. So building the capacity to do that, and I'm so glad you mentioned a breath practice before you walk in the door. That's one way. I'm sure when you do that, you have some more capacity, right? And
when I choose to remember.
Yeah. So, and that's part of the failure and recommitment, right? So what we're talking about is expanding our capacity. Basically, life has expanded beyond the modern man's capacity to be present with it. So we are behind, which is why we'll opt for numbing out with social media or Reddit or whatever.
Yeah.
Rather than really elevate our nervous system capacity, which can happen doing yoga, doing qigong, doing martial arts, doing meditation, doing, embodied men's work, right? That's a big thing that I train men in, is how do you expand your capacity to hold more? So the first step is expanding our capacity, like training ourselves to get strong, not just physically, but in our nervous system and in our capacity for awareness. So that's the first piece. Then being aware of what your limitations are within the relationship, right? So you may really only have, I don't know, I have no idea where you are, but you might have 3 or 4 nights where you can fully be present for her. And hold your child, and hold your business, and hold your, as a romantic partner. I'm just talking about a domestic partner. I'm talking about as a romantic partner. Because that's what really pisses the feminine off, right? So you could be a great domestic partner and a shitty romantic partner, and she won't be happy. She won't be happy, right? Because she'll feel like there's no love if she's truly feminine. So getting clear, like, okay, baby, like I know, like I can show up for us, like as a husband, as your lover, as your romantic partner, three nights a week or 3 days a week. And then the rest of the time I'm going to be taking care of our house, taking care of taking care of my body so that I can rejuvenate, right? Having the space with no demand, which I talk about in the book. Yeah. And so that when we are together, I can be like with you, right? And so that kind of integrity and that kind of honesty and that negotiation, because, she might be like, nope, 3 days a week ain't enough. I need 4, or we need to do it this way. Yeah. It's a negotiation, but it's a negotiation from this place of I want to show up for you versus just what I see a lot of guys do, which is kind of like tough it out and live in this kind of state of numb, almost resentment at the burden of life rather than
I feel that.
Yeah. It's normal. And I'm sure women who have to hold a lot feel it too, mothers. And I mean, this is the masculine, not necessarily men, right? Like the masculine in all of us feels the burden of responsibility and longs for freedom, peace, space. So, that whole concept about how do I own what my limitations are, craft an honest space for us to be deeply romantic together, and then still attend to the outside world. How do I do that? That's what I would consider good masculine leadership, right? Because you're feeling her, you're feeling yourself, you're feeling the relationship and what it needs, and then crafting a plan that you can live with.
Because these pinpricks, they might not even be palpable to the unconscious man because it seems so tiny. But over like 10 years, enough pinpricks could just rupture the heart.
Yeah, the feminine heart is so much more sensitive. And I'm talking about feminine beings. And this could be a man or a woman or anybody else.
Yeah,
100%. So for the feminine heart is so sensitive that every time, you're next to her and you're having a conversation or she's like asking for some part of your attention and then you just kind of go and look at your phone, that's a pinprick.
That's right.
You might as well just slap her. You know what I mean? Like it's like you're hurting her.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if that happens over and over again, or every time, you just kind of come in with a mediocre presence and give a mediocre kiss and not really look her in the eyes or breathe with her and feel her body and then just go to the couch and turn on Netflix, that hurts her. And those things fucking add up. And by the time it's chronic, she's pissed. Mm-hmm. She's pissed.
And there might be this unhealthy kind of boomerang cycle that's created where there's resentment on let's just say a traditional relationship. Mm-hmm. People relate in many ways.
Yeah.
In a traditional relationship, the man would come home, he's exhausted from work, AKA I'm talking about myself. And I literally have to do the practices of grounding and breathing and all the things, and then show up and just be open to her and be affectionate in the way, not because I have to or I should. Yeah. That's, I think, what I struggle with, and maybe what a lot of parents or busy working pros struggle with is we've done the practices, we've shown up. There's still that choice point, John, when it comes time for like the union or the affection, where sometimes I do actually tell myself, I know I feel this way. Yeah. This feeling is like a fucking leaf that floats by. Just because I feel something does not mean that it's true.
Or does not mean it's the right action to take.
100%. And I find that if I, and my experience with Carrie Michelle is that she goes primarily, not all the time, but primarily off of the way she feels. And that's been the majority of relationships where the woman shares how she feels. And that's kind of what dictates the flow of energy.
Right.
Where I have a tendency to feel my feel, but also do what I believe in my heart is right. And my throat is right. And my mind is right, connecting those three.
Right.
There's such a dichotomy there at times in the traditional space. And I'm sure it unfolds in many different ways. But can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, every relationship is different, right? Yeah. And I'm not there with y'all, at dinner time or
Can you just come and sit in our living room and check us out?
But in general, what I think you're speaking to is, so you do that, you expand your capacity, you do some breath work before you get in, you're feeling pretty good, you've kind of cleansed your system, you feel pretty good. You step in and you feel what's true in the space in the moment. And because you have more capacity, because you're more sensitive, more grounded, right, you can actually feel like, oh, this happened, or this is where she is, or this is, right, this is what is going on behind the scenes. And you can make a decision as to what would liberate love from there, right? Does she need, and I talk about this in the book, does she need like just to be held? Does she need to like talk about the shit of her day? Does she need me to draw her a bath
without me trying to solve?
That's a big one. Like without like, does she, if she need, I mean, men should know by now, like, don't give advice unless you ask, do you want my advice? But does she need, what does the space need? So there's what you need, right? And if I said, hey, Josh, like, what would you prefer? If you could just do anything you want, you get home tonight, you might, fuck, man, crash on the couch and, watch Netflix or whatever it is, or,
massage.
Get a massage. Like, So if we asked her what she wanted, she'd have her thing, right? Then there's what you want, what both of you want, and then what love wants. And tuning into what love wants may often be at the expense of what you want, sometimes at the expense of what she wants, right? Like, and it might be something else. And your capacity to tune into what love wants from a trustable place takes practice, and you're going to make mistakes, but it is the big part of masculine leadership that I'm talking about in that book.
Oh, dude, that's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, that like really hits for me and everyone else I know. I think about when you were raising Claire and you had that experience of like, you were still very on purpose at that time, yes?
Yeah.
So you were already giving a full breadth of your energy to your mission. You're bleeding for that. You come home, you would deal with the struggles of parenting. And when Carrie, when any of us pour from an empty cup, there can be, without a check and balance system, a level of resentment towards the partner. And there can be an unconscious projection of that resentment at times. Is there a way to know when, it's such a masculine question. Tell us, John, exactly, when are we aware? How can we be aware of an unconscious projection of resentment onto our partner?
That's a great question, Josh. Okay, so let me just back up a little bit. So one of the things that's crucial so that we don't do that, so we don't even get there, is this idea of nourishment. Right. And so what I see with a lot of men in your position, like working hard with a family, with a partner that, demands conscious presence, as she should, taking care, nourishing yourself is a crucial piece of life practice, right? So that might be your meditation practice. That might be morning walks. That might be time in nature with men. That might be time in nature by yourself. That might be, 10 minutes of reading something or listening to something that inspires you. That might mean playing guitar. It could mean anything, but prioritizing your nourishment. So for a short period of time, obviously letting her know, right, allows you to be full. So you're bringing fullness, right? That helps to snip a lot of resentment, because resentment, as you said, comes from an empty cup.
Yeah. Let's
just assume that most of our resentments that we have in relationship are not coming from, are based in our childhood systems, right? Once we get married, or once we commit, or once we move in, virtually every complaint we have about our partner stems from the things we didn't get when we were young and the wounds that have sort of persisted since then. And this is not just me. Like, you could talk to the Gottmans, you could talk to Harville Hendricks, you know what I mean?
Literally, John, every person at your level of consciousness and intelligence has reflected this one point in their own words.
Yeah.
So this is like universal wisdom.
Pretty much.
This is not just your anecdotal
No, this is not just me. This is every therapist that's dealt with relationships. Dan Tatkin is somebody I like a lot, right?
Yes.
So one of the things that that I think is important is that we just understand, like, oh man, if I'm resentful, usually it's my shit, and usually there's something I need. There's something I need from them. And so rather than get caught up in the story, drop into your heart and really feel, what do I need? I just need her to give me a little space so I can reconnect to myself. Or I need a little acknowledgement, or I need a little sweet energy, or I need a little bit of praise and love. Like, what do I need? And then you can actually, once you're in your heart feeling the need, like literally I say, go into the fucking tissues of your heart and feel where it lives, because that's where it lives. It's not mental, it's literally in your heart. And then you can feel what she needs. So from my heart feeling, I need praise. I just need to be acknowledged for how hard I'm working. I'm saying you to feel this way, but a lot of men do. And then you can feel her heart. What does she need? Oh, she needs just my slow, deep, grounded presence. She needs to feel safe. She needs to feel held, right? Okay. So I'm feeling my heart and what I need. Now I'm feeling her heart and what she needs. And I can go to her and say, baby, what do you need? My love, what do you need? Right? Like, what do you need? Just tell me. And if I'm coming from the place of feeling my heart and feeling her heart, I'm not coming from the monkey mind, she did this and she never and she always and they always. I'm not doing that. I'm actually in the body, in the heart. And there's a whole different possibility of relating that comes from that kind of experience.
Yeah, it's because dogs, women, and bees can sense, smell fear. They have this intuitive capacity. The feminine energy has this intuitive capacity that is so different and so much more beautiful and just unique than the masculine, I guess you could say, awareness. And so the come from, when I'm asking my woman, hey, baby, what do you need? If it's right from here, she's going to know actually in the first audible of my first word.
Yeah.
But if I'm asking her, what do you need?
Yeah.
That's totally different.
So now what do you need?
This isn't a checklist for us to be like, okay, I've asked her what I've needed. And I find a lot of men fall into this category of like, well, if I just do the 5 things to open her heart, then that's going to open her heart. But it doesn't, it's such a paradox because checking a box on this stuff does not work.
No, it's got to be real. It's got to be in the body. It's got to be in the body, man.
An embodiment, which is why you teach so many workshops. If you had to guess, probably over 100,000 people at this point plus. Something that you've taught in your career.
Something like that.
I trust you're loving this podcast as much as I am. It's one of my absolute favorites. You know, when we show up to relationships, when we show up to ourselves, when we show up to life, if we don't have the proper physical nourishment, it's going to end up poorly. We're not going to be able to love ourselves. We're not going to be able to love others as effectively. If you are dealing with this right now, you have low energy. I've dealt with this in my own life personally. You know that phrase, hangry? Like you forget to eat, or you're in the afternoon and you're like, what should I consume? Maybe you don't have healthy snacks around you and you don't want to go to a junk machine and get some chocolate nonsense. Instead of the nonsense, do something called ketone IQ. It is ketones delivered in a shot from my friends over at HVMN, otherwise known as Health via Modern Nutrition. Now, this is really cool. These little exogenous molecules, the scientists that actually did the research, millions and millions of dollars, that the Department of Defense paid them millions of dollars for, you can benefit from this. This tech used to cost so much. It used to cost 20 times more than what you're going to get it for, which is like way less than going out for dinner with your friends. These scientists have proven that these ketones, they lower appetite signaling. Now, this is what's really cool. When you turn down the volume of the hunger hormone ghrelin, this is why it's so important. A lot of the time, what stimulates your central nervous system can be an unfortunate byproduct that makes you hungry a few hours later. Key in coffee. If you're doing a bunch of stimulants, you're going to have a bunch of energy, you're going to block the adenosine, and then you're going to crash. There is a better way. You can use exogenous ketones, which are produced naturally by the body in a fasted state, but who the hell wants to fast all the time? Not me. This is a powerful way for you to get the benefits of fasting without actually stopping your food consumption. Think about it as a way to retrain your insulin, your ghrelin, and your body for greater satiation and satiety. This is where you get energy from the inside out. You can get 20% off. Give these ketone IQ shots a chance. Give them a chance at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you don't like them, you can write to them and send them back. By the way, nobody's ever done that, but give it a shot. If you've been looking for something besides coffee, do this. It's a beautiful, powerful coffee alternative, just clean energy without a bunch of stimulation. I think you're going to love it. JoshTrent.com/HVMN. Use the code JOSH, J-O-S-H, to get 20% off. JoshTrent.com/HVMN. Use code JOSH, get 20% off. Have a new energy source in the afternoon besides coffee. I think this is something you're going to really enjoy. Now let's get back to the podcast. Is there a common thread when you look at the I guess you could say unintegrated or the wounded projections of men specifically when it comes to the mind and the heart? You know, Hawkins talks about the greatest space for us is between the head and the heart. Sometimes for us, it's miles. Has there been a common thread with all the men that have come to your workshops and they say like, I'm doing everything she asked for and I'm still not getting what I want. What are they missing? What is that thread that they're missing?
I mean, basically the whole book is about that. I talk about the myth of the good husband, right? Like, I'm giving her everything that she wants. I'm supporting of her career. I'm a good husband. I'm a good provider. I'm a good father, and yet it's still never enough. And those currencies, the currencies that we were raised on thinking are the most important currencies for love, are no longer the most important. That now they're just the table stakes. That's just where you start, right? Now there's these new currencies that the feminine is waking up to about presence and depth and humor and embodiment, right? And a certain kind of sexuality that's possible. Like, they are realizing that and it's great because they're calling us to a deeper understanding of magic, love, all the beautiful things, right?
Yeah.
They're 100,000 years ahead of us. They've been dancing in the woods and, practicing magic and doing the things that women were trained to do for hundreds of thousands of years. We were basically warring, and I'm generalizing tremendously, but over the course of time, the arts that women in a society were taught to develop were much more intuitive, embodied, heart-centered, magic-centered, expression-centered, right? What we were taught to do was hunt and fight and protect and kill, right? 100,000 years of that. There's only been 50 years of us trying to catch up to them. So this is what I tell women all the time. I'm like, you got 100,000 year head start, and you've got to give these guys who are trying
Give us some grace.
Yeah, give us a little grace.
Give us some grace.
Because you asked about the thread, the common thread. And the first one is that men want to love well. Like, really, they do. Like, they wouldn't come to me, or, you know what I mean? They want to love their partners really well. So there's this really beautiful, innocent, deep yearning to be a good man, right? To be a deep, beautiful lover of their partner. And then I think what happens is they get confused because the things that they thought worked aren't working, right? And so where they end up coming to me is there's a bit of confusion. Like, I'm fucking successful. I'm a good dad. Like, like, we've got this incredible life, and there's still this tension between us. And so, yeah, I'd say the predominant experience is men feel confused as to why things aren't working. And I think it's basically, we weren't taught that these new practices and currencies were what really, that the modern woman, in a very small place in society, I mean, I'm talking Western society, mainly heteronormative relating, right? All those things, but that the modern woman wants from us and feels is needed. And so they come like going like, what am I doing wrong? And that's kind of where we start.
That's the unraveling. I love that you talked about domestic and then the lover. So there's like the romantic aspect, and then there's the domestic aspect. I remember I heard Jordan Peterson say something like, there is nothing worse and a disservice to this world than an adult child, than a man who has ignored responsibility for decades. It's not to shame this man. I mean, shit, maybe in my 20s, that was me, for sure.
Certainly been me.
But the complete almost ignorance and head in the sand aspect of men, where there's this chasing for hedonism. I was born and raised in Southern California and San Diego. So, Pacific Beach and all these tantalizing things and, lots of unconscious sex and pornography and all these things that I've really done multiple vision quests, Vipassana, ceremonies, breath work to forgive myself for, just to forgive myself for, because that's where love comes from, is forgiveness. Do you find that aspect in yourself? When did you really accept responsibility for your life purpose? And how do you see that unfold where men could identify that in themselves?
Well, I think I accepted responsibility for my life purpose. It kind of was a process where I wasn't even looking to. It wasn't like, this is my purpose, I'm going to do this. It was like, this is my practice. And I think I really committed to becoming a deep practitioner of what I knew was going to change my life, right? And this was the work that I was learning with David and other teachers that I knew. And so I spent 3, 4, 5, 6 years just practicing, just being of service to my community, just assisting. And as I got good at it, people started to want things from me, like, hey man, like, teach me some of these practices. And so I started to do that. And then at that point, I realized, this must have been 10 years ago, I realized, like, you know what, like, I this is what I want to do with my life. At the time, I had a business, I had Claire, I was trying to make money, I had a flower business, I was a regular entrepreneur. And so,
what kind of business was it?
I was in the wholesale flower business.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I bought flowers in San Diego.
That's so interesting with the work you do in the world. You were a seller of flowers, of beauty.
Yeah, imported flowers from all over the world. Yeah,
I bet you've never talked about that. I've never heard you say that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, for 15 years. Still had that business until 2021 when the pandemic wiped it out. But I wasn't in it. I've been in it for 10 years. So I decided then that was what I wanted to do. And then but it was a process. And then the second piece is that is still happening. Like, I'm constantly having to reflect and take responsibility for the things that I make mistakes on, or, things I wish I could do differently in relationship, or things that I'm learning. And I don't think that's ever going to, I hope that never changes, because I feel like, there's the, to to separate the teacher, right? Like, and the practitioner. So I have this amazing set of skills where I can take people into super deep places and incredibly juicy places. And I can do that with my partner, and I can create these like amazing love openings and tantric sex practices and all these things.
Yeah.
But then there's the karma of the human, right? Who was, a product of multiple divorces and has the epigenetic history of alcoholism.
Your mom and dad both married and divorced 3 times each.
Yeah. No, my mom 3 times. Yeah, my mom 3 times. My dad 4 times.
Wow.
Yeah. One was the same woman. So you know what I mean? But so there was just multiple divorces in my family. So I have that karmic piece that I'm still working through, right? And so sometimes I'm really good at one of those things, and the other one I'm still learning. I'm still learning how to choose a right partner, and then how to recognize what I need versus what they need, and to stay in integrity and to integrate everything that I'm teaching, right? And so, I would love to sit here and say, like, I seamlessly and effortlessly integrate everything I teach into every relationship I've ever had, but that'd be fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
I'm just another bozo on the bus, trying to like love well and love deeply and, take care of the person that I love. And sometimes I make mistakes. And then what I'm proud of as a man, and this is not as a teacher, this is just as a man, is that I'm exceptionally good at reflecting on my part in things. And luckily I have really good men around me who can help me, sort of sift through what's my ego, what's my masochism, what's my, all of it, and help me get to the truth so that the next time I can do a little bit better.
Well, dude, this is so truthful. Because I remember I used to listen to Alan Watts in the shower when I was single, like for 10 years. And one of the things he said is, the reason that we need objective feedback is because you can't touch the tip of your own finger. You can't bite your teeth with your teeth. You can't, it doesn't work that way, consciousness of self. We need conscious mirroring from other people. Otherwise, there can be kind of the ego's thread where you lead a life for 2 decades, 3 decades, and there's no reflection. And actually, our society celebrates no reflection. There's a celebration of consumption and less reflection, which breaks my heart. Is there something about your mom and dad that breaks your heart? And how have you unpacked that to where it doesn't hold the charge with you anymore so that you can show up clean to a woman?
Yeah. That's a great question, man. Well, I think it's the piece, both my mom and my dad are alone. My sister, both my sisters, I don't know, one of them might be, in a romantic relationship, but my family, the family karma, right, is to grow old and die alone. Right. And I am committed just as a human. And again, this is different. The intersection of human and teacher is impossible to, pull apart. And as a human, I'm committed to changing that karma. Like, I've changed so much of my family karma. Like, I was the dad to Claire that my dad was not to me. I make a fantastic living teaching what I love, whereas both of my parents could not even, could not go anywhere near that. Right. So I've changed so much karma. This is sort of the last piece of this really making a deep, powerful love work, right? And so I'm committed. Even though I've had incredible relationships. I've had so many amazing women in my life. This feels like the last piece. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I'm really trying I'm really trying. That's the piece that feels undone for me. And even though, and it's what's great is that I'm continually learning on the teacher side and on the practitioner side what I need for the karmic human side. And so the two are feeding each other in a really beautiful way. Clunky sometimes, messy sometimes, incomplete sometimes, but this is part of being human.
It's interesting. One of the things I've said when I first got with Carrie, and I've felt this for many years of my life, is, am I paying for the sins of my father and my grandfather? And how does that spiritual credit card of karma work when I pay for the sins of other grandparents and other men that have wounded a woman that I'm with? And there has been, I've noticed, an essence of resentment and an anger towards those men for the pain that they, and even to Carrie Michelle, like her father, her brother, that lineage, like the things she shared with me, and I'll respect her by not sharing details, but there's a part of my heart that feels anger against the wounded masculine that wounded her, which then shows up in our relationship. And I say this with total love and respect. Like she's got stuff, so do I. Otherwise we wouldn't be together and no one would be together. We are a Rubik's Cube for one another in a beautiful way, painful way sometimes. Have you ever sensed that when you feel into that, the sins of our brothers and our fathers and our grandparents and even other people's ancestry? How do you make peace with that yourself?
That's great. And I actually wrote a chapter on that about we're responsible for the sins of our fathers, right? So the way that I look at it is that, and again, you know, this is just my intention. I might not always complete this, or I might not always do it perfectly, but the idea is to step in and be a healing source for those wounds, and to step into a partnership really from this place of like, I want to be a source of healing for her. I want to, for those old wounds, I want to, you know, the way that the analogy I use in the book is, imagine stepping into this beautiful forest, you know, or at this beautiful waterfall, and you see all this trash that somebody else left. Well, you could leave it there, right? And then just kind of go enjoy the waterfall and da-da-da-da.
Such a good analogy.
Or you could actually like pack it out and maybe even leave something in return, so that you're leaving her with the better, you know, with a better experience. Now, you know, again, this is one of those things that I'm, you know, sometimes I don't do perfectly. Sometimes, you know, I may have a partner that doesn't think I did it, even though I really tried my best. But I know that that's my intention, is to be a healing source. And I do think that not totally removes, but quells the anger that I would have towards other men, because these dudes didn't. I mean, think about it. Like, we barely know what the fuck to do, and we're a pretty conscious generation or two, right? There's been two good generations. Those guys had no clue. My dad had no shot. He had no shot, given the fathering that he had, and you know what I mean. And so, it's a thing to forgive them.
It's such a fascinating concept. You talked about some of the research, and you said you're dangerous in your knowledge about the interfamily systems and family constellations. But that work, like we've had Mark Wolin on the show a couple times. He wrote a book called "It Didn't Start With You." On a cellular level, John, when you and I were born, we had already been an egg in our mother when she was born, which lights my fire. I'm like, how is that even possible? That the feminine egg inside of a womb that held the sperm was already potentiated 3 generations back. It's just so wild to even think about the mystery of life. And I wonder if you see this, and maybe if you feel this in your own being, the way in which we unconsciously hurt others, yourself, me, all of us, we learned it from our loving caregivers who learned it from their loving caregivers. And so I'm not saying this to like shame my dad or shame my mom. I really do believe in my heart of hearts that like they did the absolute best they could with the level of consciousness they had, much like your dad, your mom. But the awareness around this, I believe, and this is why I'm even putting this in the book that I'm writing, is like this emotional epigenetics, the way that you and I are born with certain health proclivities. Like some people are born with type 1 diabetes. How could we ever argue? I wonder how you feel about this. How could we ever argue that emotional characteristics, behavioral characteristics are not stamped and encoded in our DNA, waiting for the epi to turn it on or off, just like the physical?
Well, that does happen. And the good news is, now if you think about how that egg, see, that's what I would call karma, right? So epigenetics is really just another way of saying manifest embodied karma, right? So our karma, that epigenetics, manifests as our embodied karma. And so every time we take a deep breath rather than yell, every time we do that practice of going into our heart and feeling our needs rather than projecting, right? Every time we make a new decision, we are changing our karma. And every time we engage in that new behavior, and Rhonda Patrick, I don't know if you listen to her, but she's done a lot of great work on this. every time we do this, we actually, if we do it long enough and we do it enough times, we change our epigenetic, we change the genetics, we change our DNA. So that our children or even ourselves, we don't carry that anymore. So that's why this concept of capacity is so important. This is why, guys that come to me and want strategies of how to succeed with women, I'm saying like, you better like breathe, man. That's your strategy. Breathe and ground and feel the infinite. There you go. Oh, soften your heart. That's your strategy. Because without that, we are sitting fucking ducks to that epigenetic momentum, right? So the karma, changing your karma is a moment by moment dropping into the body, relaxing the mind and making the better decision. And in doing that, I believe this is going to be supported by research soon.
Yes.
That we change our genetics.
There was a study, and I'm not going to get the location right, but the study was done by like a prestigious university, and they traumatized a mouse, and they could sense when that mouse breeded with other non-traumatized mice that the signaling inside of their genome was turned on to hypervigilance 5 generations after the initial trauma, even with mice that weren't traumatized themselves. So what does that tell you if all beings have a systemic connection? I know we're not mice, but there is something that science is showing us about energy and spirit and emotion, energy and motion, that we must pay attention to. If we don't pay attention to it, then we're gonna, like men that go to the workshops, we're just gonna try to apply rigorous science all the time. I think science is supposed to inform spirit. I think it was designed as a blending of those two, and somewhere along, science became God.
Yeah, that was the nature of the 20th century, really, right? Like science and technology became more important than spirit, right?
Like people that shout out, well, I believe it because it's science. With their fist clenched. I'm like, that's the wrong belief if you have to say it like that. Well, and I do think that there's a recalibration that's happening, right? Where God no longer means the church. Right. That's right.
It can mean any number of individuated spiritual practices. So I think that's kind of, there's more space. But the thing that I was thinking about when you were talking was how many people in relationships are dealing with the traumas of their families, their parents, their grandparents, all of those things. Right. I'm still dealing with the fucking Irish curse, from my great grandfather, right, and the potato blight and all that stuff.
Sure.
And So, and we're dealing with our partners. And so the capacity to cultivate spaciousness, right? Because trauma, getting into it with trauma has some benefit for sure, like really getting into the body, relaxing the nervous system. I'm writing another book now on nervous system regulation as kind of a sexual relational practice.
Oh, beautiful.
But that's one approach. The other approach is to be spacious enough to allow for the trauma to do its thing without getting hooked into the experience of the trauma in front of you, which is hard work, right? And so that is a meditative practice. That is something that I'm hoping to experience more and more of as I get aware of it. And I think something that men, like these new currencies that men in particular I'm asking men to step into, require different practices, different skill sets, different commitments than the ones that are just about make money, get the girl, be a good, community person, all that kind of shit. It's much deeper than that. It's much deeper than that, what we're being asked to do, I think, as men. And it's why I have a job.
And I think you're going to continue to have a job. And also, I believe you told me that you do certify coaches in your work. Okay.
Yeah. Teachers.
So, and this isn't, okay, y'all, this is not coaches to coach other coaches, how to coach coaches to coach coaches.
Right.
This is actual coaches working with people.
Yeah.
This coaches that work with clients. This is a
teacher training that is 3. I mean, I have a few years ago, I started a teacher training program because I wanted there to be some accountability. I would have people come to workshops of mine one or two, come to a couple weekends, and then all of a sudden they're an embodied men's coach, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I need to have a little more control and integrity and over the process of what it means to start to deliver this work, right, into the world. So I started 1,000-hour teacher training because I thought that's the minimum of 1,000 hours of practice with a teacher or in a modality for you to get competent.
Yeah.
I mean, think of a martial artist. Sure. Or a tennis player, or a concert pianist, or you know what I mean? Like these are not, or a pilot, an airline pilot. Like these are all reasonable things.
I think they have to do 10,000 hours.
Yeah, something crazy like that, right? So I started a teacher training program, and it's a 3-year program, and it's all peer reviewed, and we've had our first 2 years of certified teachers. And they're certified in embodiment. They're certified in masculine, feminine embodiment. They're certified in sexual polarity work. So we give them a certification, and not everybody who makes it through 3 years gets certified after the 3rd year. There's a certain level of commitment, and so I'm very proud of that, man. I'm super proud of the group, and I'm super proud of the people that actually commit to not just learning something so they can rush out and teach it, but really steeping in what I consider is a very deep lineage of embodied practice.
I love that you talked about the repatterning, the reprogramming of the lineage, because that was an aspect of trauma or of unconscious relating that you brought up, but also something else you wrote in the book that just rocked my world that has like 2 colors of highlight on it. No true change in behavior or thinking can come without an awakened body and an activated heart and a spacious mind. That is another tall order. I wonder if you could summarize that, because at first audible, people might be like, well, how in the hell do you do that?
Yeah.
Can you summarize that a little bit?
Yeah, sure, man. So, and again, these are all, I know they sound so woo-woo-y and so like,
not really. That does not sound woo-woo to me at all.
Esoteric, let's say, right?
Okay.
Right. So, but they're really yogic. They're really yogic. Like activated body just means you and I did the breath practice that activated our bodies, right? I soften my heart, and let's just like feel the heavy softness of my heart. Now my heart is activated. I feel beyond my thoughts into the spacious core of consciousness and feel it extending out into the cosmos as the expanding universe, right? I do those 3 things over and over again. It's a 10-second meditative practice. Maybe I extend it to a minute or 30 seconds or something like that. But these are all very doable practices that we can start to integrate into our days. And I think what most people bump into is they don't realize like how much work they actually need to, how much karmic patterning they're changing. So they'll like do 5 or 10 minutes of meditation in the morning and be like, why isn't my life changing? No, because you might need it 100 times a day.
Sure.
You might need to press your feet into the ground, press your sit bone into the earth, take a deep breath into your belly, soften your heart, and feel the infinite space of awareness that this moment is emerging from. And you might need to do that 100 times a day just to train your nervous system to receive it. And I think that's what most people are that's the rude awakening that I think modern humans are coming up against is, wow, we need a lot of fucking work to change the patterning of our body minds.
I think for a long time, I used to ask the question of where does the power of choice come from? But then I realized that was the wrong question to ask, because that's like saying, what is the origin of God? There's some things that my mind could like never understand. So instead now, and I wonder how you feel about this, instead of asking the question, where does the power to change come from? I just focus on how can I generate more power to change?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. How can I put myself in a better position to feel beyond the habits of my body mind into what life is wanting to push through me? Right? Because let's face it, the magic of life is amazing, right? Our hearts are beating.
Yeah.
Right. All these things are happening without us thinking about it at all.
So good.
And if we can just if we can stop scheming, striving, and relax our body minds to connect to that pulse of life that is beating our heart, making the world, flowers bloom, doing all those kinds of things, we are going to make better choices. We are going to have more wisdom emerge. And this is part of what I'm trying to tell men. It's like, the actually backing into that, slowing down and feeling that pulse of life wanting to move you will be a better strategy for success than constantly scheming, constantly, trying to win. Right?
It seems like the strategy is that there's no strategy, and the strategy is actually just to learn how to have the faculty of trust.
Yeah, but there is embodied work. Like it does take something to relax our mind enough to feel the pulse of life that's beating our heart.
Yes.
And then to allow that wisdom to emerge in the moment. That takes something, right? And the way I try to teach it to men is I'm like, just stop doing, stop striving, stop practicing, just like relax into receiving the wisdom of the moment through your body, and wait for some intuitive thought. Wait for something to come through, some next move, like we were talking about when you come home from work. Right?
Yeah.
Suppose you do that breath practice, you sit on the porch and you just kind of receive the wisdom of the moment and wait for how you're going to love your family to come through that moment, right? Might be play Monopoly. It might be, carry my wife upstairs and make love for 30 minutes. It might be whatever it is, right? Whatever comes through you, it's coming from a deeper place than your habitual thoughts.
Yes.
And that's, I think, what I'm really trying to teach men to have access to. And it's, it's a challenge, but all of them get it. Like, you're getting it, right? When we're talking about it.
Yeah.
As soon as I start offering that as a possibility, men are like, oh yeah, this feels a lot better than trying to figure it out.
Yeah. One of them is like a hardware only approach. The other one's hardware and software. And then like the brain is an amalgam of neurons and dendrites and axons, and like it's plastic, man. We truly can. I believe this with everything in my body. Like we truly can change our brain. We can.
Yeah.
My mom, as I've shared with the audience, like she's fighting with kidney disease. And so she's in the hospital today, actually this morning getting surgery. Yeah. And I'm like, I with love and honoring of my mom, I look at the choices that she made in life to get her to this place. And at first I felt anger, like, why aren't you going to be here for my son, your grandson? And then anger quickly dissipated to what was always below that, which is just sadness and grief. And from that sadness and grief, I can actually just love her from that place. But I've had to go through like each wave of it, which really constitutes what you're talking about, where any man has certain practices that allow him to just be still and receive what you said, the wisdom of the moment. Otherwise, how the hell am I going to receive the wisdom of any moment if I'm checking my phone, if I'm not breathing, if I'm jitterbug? There's just no way around it. So dude, I could go for so much longer on this podcast. Good, I've really enjoyed the juice that we've been extracting today.
Yeah, right on.
What is the wisdom that in your heart really drove you to write the book? And how does that wisdom continue to inform you about your curiosity for what's possible in the future?
I'm not sure if it was a wisdom more than going back to one of the first things you said about the wound, I'm a product of a sort of an absent masculine and neglectful masculine. It wasn't abuse, but it was neglect, right? In my family, other families, it's abuse. And I think it's a compulsion to help change that. Right. And so when I'm working with men, it's not like I feel how much they want to do better than their fathers did, how much they want to show up in a different way than their grandfathers and fathers did. And so I really feel like the wound has become the gift for me, and in my life. And so I would call it it's very human why I wrote the book and why I do the work that I do, because I really, I want men to have more choice, to have more capacity, to be able to heal the world in a certain way that, that they've never been taught.
Yeah. That's so beautiful, man.
Yeah, thanks, man.
I was talking with a mentor, his name is Paul Check, and I was telling him about, it's been almost 600 interviews we've done over the past 8 years. And with you, there's 100% purity around you owning your wound, but also not allowing that wound to cloud your wisdom. And with a lot of teachers, unfortunately, because of the rise of marketing and social media, we don't have to focus on it. I just know it's there. There's a lot of wounded leaders that aren't being honest about their wounding, and it tends to cloud their wisdom, which then unfortunately hurts their students in some way.
Yeah.
I wonder, as parting guidance, people already know that I love your work. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. And I trust that your integrity around like how you show up and your honesty. Is there a feeling that someone should look out for? Or is there a sensory perception that a student of emotional intelligence, emotional growth, spiritual growth should look out for when receiving guidance from a teacher to notice if that wisdom is being clouded by the wounding?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Well, first of all, let's just say that every teacher brings their wound into how they teach. Nobody has been able to separate it completely, right?
Yeah.
All they can do is try to be transparent about it. And in that, so I think that if their teacher is transparent about the wound that they're working with, you know what I mean? That's a good sign. That's a really good sign.
Yes.
And the other thing is, and this is kind of new. This has been a shift for me, which is the willingness to not have one of the answers that's possible, right? So when a teacher says, this is something like, this is what I'm trying to give you, but if this doesn't feel right in your body, trust your body's wisdom. Like that's a relatively new thing for me, that I started to realize, like, you know what, even though I feel in my body and my experience that this is the best approach to this practice, other people might not even have the capacity, or a whole different thing. And so the ability to be humble in the moment while giving the clear gift, I think is also a really good thing to look for in your teachers. And then I would tell, if I could say something for the students, right? The moment you start to get because I've just seen this with so many students, including me, I did this too. The moment you start to project your family's wounds, like you start to create a story or a narrative about your teacher, you are likely in the family system, because it's almost impossible not to separate yourself from a teacher and the family, right? Almost impossible. So when there's self-righteousness or when there's projection, one of the things that we try to work with is to unpack that, right? So that the students can feel like, hey, you know, I'm projecting this onto this trainer, or I'm projecting this onto John, or I'm projecting this stuff. Because otherwise, if you don't address it with the teacher, you're going to bring it into your teaching.
Yeah.
And so it's something that is a really important piece to all of those things. I think are really important. And it's why I'm so passionate about teacher training, because it takes a while to unpack that shit, man.
Dude, this was so good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah.
As we say goodbye, we're going to have all the links to your programs, to the book. You guys, I read this book in the sauna, like no joke. I'll show you my copy. It's highlighted.
And it's sweaty.
I really, it's got some drops in that.
Yeah.
I really took the time to open my heart to your work and to open my relationship to the teachings.
Yeah,
because human relationship has been by far my most massive learning curve. That and then close second would be finances, right? But as far as getting shit done and hard charging, like it's kind of always come natural to me.
Yeah, me too.
So I really appreciate and honestly honor the work that you do in the world. And I wonder, with all that you've created, if you could just answer this last question. One thing that I've been teaching to the students in the Breathe program is this sensory perception of all the things that constrict us and make us feel like we can't express. And I've found that if someone isn't clear in their mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, even financial nourishment, that they can't live their life well. What is your recipe though? Like if you had to encapsulate wellness, you know, how does John Wineland live his life well? How would you begin to define wellness?
Well, I'll be super simple here, which is just breathe in, open as. You know, so be a yes to, like, breathe in what's happening in the moment. And then I'll let your body, like a flower bloom, open as. And if it's really that simple. It's actually a practice I learned from my teacher. And it's being a yes to the moment. It's breathing in the moment without, you know, closure or stiffness. And it's allowing your heart to open as whatever the moment is offering you. And I think if you do that moment by moment, multiple times a day, your nervous system relaxes, your brain chemistry changes, your heart rhythm, you know, stabilizes, everything just kind of becomes more clear. So that would be my tip for wellness.
That's very wise, man. And then from that place, there's a greater container. There's a greater capacity to do whatever it is we do in the world.
Yeah.
It's so good, man. So from my heart to yours,
thank you, John.
Thank you, John, for being here. Thank you guys for being with us. Until John and I see you again on another podcast at some other point in the future, we're both wishing you love and wellness. We'll talk to you then. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you love this video, hit subscribe. That way you'll be automatically notified when new videos come out, new episodes, and also share this video with a friend. If you loved it, they're gonna love it too. Check out some of the videos on this screen that are perfectly curated based on the video you just saw. Make sure you follow me, and I'll see you in the next video.